Max was more than just a police dog. He was a legend. Every officer in the department knew his name. New recruits were told stories of his bravery, and veterans spoke of him with pride. He wasn't aggressive or intimidating like people often imagined K-9s to be. He was calm, focused, and sharp, always alert, always ready. From the moment he stepped onto the training field as a young pup, Max had shown something rare. His instincts were flawless, his loyalty unquestionable. By the time he was 2 years old, he had already saved lives. He once tracked a missing toddler through a thunderstorm, leading searchers straight to the child under a collapsed shed. Another time, he leaped between his handler and a suspect, taking a blow meant for the officer. That was Max. Silent in action, powerful in presence. His handler, Officer Daniels, often said Max understood him better than most people. They had worked side by side for 8 years, trusting each other completely. In the middle of chaos, a single look between them was enough. Daniels could sense when Max was tense, and Max always knew when Daniels was afraid, even if he never showed it. But as the years passed, Max began to slow down. His once sharp reflexes dulled. The spring in his step softened into a careful walk. He began having trouble breathing during long patrols. At first, the department thought it was age catching up. But after a sudden collapse during a training demo, tests were run. The diagnosis hit harder than anyone expected. A rare, irreversible disease was attacking Max's nervous system. There was no cure. Time was running out. The news spread quickly through the station. Officers who had once stood proudly beside Max were stunned into silence. They brought him toys, treats, and blankets. Some just came to sit beside him for a few quiet minutes. The station, usually filled with chatter and urgency, felt heavy with sadness. Officer Daniels stayed by Max's side every chance he got. He brushed his fur gently, whispered stories from their past missions, and tried to hide the crack in his voice. Max, ever loyal, still wagged his tail when Daniels walked in. He didn't understand the pain in his partner's eyes. He just wanted to be near him. One morning, Daniels walked into the vet's office with a quiet determination. He had made a decision. Max deserved one final ride, one last chance to serve, one more day as the hero he had always been. Officer Daniels wasn't known for being overly emotional. He had served on the force for nearly 2 decades and had seen more than his share of chaos, heartbreak, and danger. But nothing had prepared him for the moment he sat across from the veterinarian and heard the words that confirmed his worst fear. Max was dying, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The vet spoke gently, explaining how the disease was progressing rapidly. Max's muscles were weakening, and soon even walking would become painful. Daniels didn't respond right away. He just looked down at Max, who lay quietly at his feet, tail thumping weakly every few seconds, as if trying to lift his partner's spirit. They had been through everything together. High-speed chases, hidden weapons, hostage calls, even long, silent nights where nothing happened except a shared cup of coffee and the sound of Max breathing in the back seat. Daniels had trusted Max with his life, and Max had never once let him down. Back at home, Daniels sat on the floor beside Max's bed, stroking the aging dog's fur. Photos lined the walls. Pictures of Max receiving awards, standing tall beside him in uniform, sitting proudly in front of a school during a safety demonstration. He wasn't just a dog. He was a brother in arms, a protector, a friend. Daniels thought about what Max loved most: being on patrol, the open road, the hum of the engine, the thrill of being needed. That's when it hit him. Max didn't want to fade away in silence. He deserved to go out the way he lived, serving with pride. So Daniels made a quiet promise. He called the department the next morning and asked for permission to take Max out on one last ride. Not for work, not for duty, just for closure. Just to feel that bond again, the way it used to be. The chief didn't hesitate. Everyone understood what it meant. It wasn't about catching bad guys anymore. It was about honoring a hero in the only way that felt right. Daniels prepared Max's vest, carefully placing it on him even though it hung a little loose now. He helped him into the car, where Max immediately perked up at the familiar sound of the siren being tested. It was faint, but the old spark was still there in his eyes. As the cruiser rolled out of the station for one final patrol, Daniels didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Max already knew. The morning was calm as Officer Daniels and Max cruised through familiar streets. The windows were rolled down slightly, letting in the cool breeze. Max's head rested on the edge of the window, eyes scanning the neighborhood slowly. He wasn't as alert as he used to be, but there was a quiet awareness in his gaze, a deep instinct that still lingered beneath the surface. They passed by the school where Max had once done a demonstration for second graders. A few of the kids had cried when they were told Max was retiring. Now, the playground was empty, and the cruiser continued on toward the outskirts of town, where trees replaced buildings and the sounds of the city faded into birdsong and rustling leaves. Daniels didn't expect anything that day. This wasn't a shift. It was a farewell. A moment to remember the roads they'd traveled together. But as they drove near a wooded trail behind a city park, something happened. Max suddenly sat up straighter. His ears twitched. He sniffed the air quickly, then let out a sharp, unexpected cry. It wasn't loud, but it was urgent. Daniels looked over, surprised. Max hadn't barked in days, let alone made a noise like that. His eyes were wide, locked onto the trees, as if he were seeing something invisible to human eyes. Without waiting, Max scratched at the cruiser door, something he hadn't done in weeks. Daniels pulled over and opened the door. Max jumped down, not with the grace he once had, but with purpose. His paws hit the ground, and he immediately started toward the edge of the woods, tail stiff, nose low to the ground. Daniels followed, uncertain but trusting. "What is it, boy?" he asked, more out of habit than hope. Max didn't look back. He moved slowly but with clear intent, as if something deep inside him had awakened for one final task. They weaved through trees and tall grass. Max's breathing was heavy, but he didn't stop. After about 50 yards, he halted near a thick patch of brush and let out a soft whine. Daniels moved quickly, parting the branches. There, curled beneath the leaves, was a small boy, shivering, dirty, and barely conscious. Daniels froze for a split second. It was the missing child from yesterday's alert. Max lay down beside the boy without hesitation, gently nudging him with his nose. The boy stirred, eyes fluttering open. Daniels radioed for help, heart pounding, tears forming. Max, somehow, had known. The moment Daniels found the boy, everything changed. He could hear the urgency in his radio call as he asked for backup. But for now, the only thing that mattered was the child in front of him, and the dog at his side. Max, once a beacon of strength and energy, now lay beside the boy, his head resting gently against the child's shoulder. Despite his own frailty, Max's protective instincts had never wavered. Daniels knelt beside the boy, quickly assessing his condition. He was cold, his lips pale from exposure, but he was alive. The missing person alert from yesterday echoed in Daniels' mind. This was the child who had vanished from his home in the middle of the night. How had Max found him? The search teams had combed this very area, and no one had seen a trace. Max, weak but unwavering, let out a low whine. Daniels gently touched the boy's face, checking for signs of concussion, then pulled his jacket tighter around him. "It's okay, buddy. You're safe now," he murmured, his voice steady despite the chaos within. But Max wasn't done. His eyes, still sharp, scanned the woods around them as if making sure they weren't being watched, still guarding even in his final moments. "Hang on, little guy. Help's on the way," Daniels reassured the boy, though he didn't feel as certain as his words sounded. Max had led him here for a reason, and Daniels was starting to understand. There was no coincidence in this. Within minutes, the sound of sirens and voices filled the air. Officers, paramedics, and search teams rushed toward them, a flurry of activity that felt surreal to Daniels. He watched as the boy was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, his small hand gripping Max's fur one last time before being taken away. Daniels didn't move. He couldn't. Max had done it. He had saved the boy, even when his strength had all but abandoned him. The weight of the moment sank deep into Daniel's chest. The bond between them, the trust that had been built over countless hours of service, was something that could never be replaced. Max had known the child was in trouble. Max had known exactly what he needed to do. As the rescue team worked, Daniel sat beside Max, stroking his fur softly. He didn't want to leave him alone in this moment, not when he had just shown one last glimpse of his heroic spirit. "You did it, buddy. You really did it," Daniels whispered. Max's tail wagged weakly, just enough to show he was still there, still with him. It was the final act of courage, the last gift from a dog who had given everything for the safety of others. The rescue of the missing boy spread like wildfire across the city, but soon it wasn't just local news. The story of the brave, dying German shepherd who had saved a life one last time touched hearts around the world. As soon as the rescue teams confirmed the boy was in stable condition, the media began to swarm. News vans filled the park's parking lot, reporters with cameras and microphones quickly surrounding Daniels and the K-9 unit. Max, exhausted from the day's events, was still lying quietly at Daniels' side as paramedics checked his vitals. Despite his weakening health, Max's presence commanded attention. People gathered, not to celebrate the boy's rescue, but to honor the dog who had made it possible. It was a moment of raw emotion that seemed to unite everyone in the park. Strangers, fellow officers, and even children came forward to thank the hero in their midst. Social media was quick to pick up the story. Photos of Max and Daniels in the woods, with Max's protective head resting beside the child, were shared millions of times within hours. Hashtags like #MaxTheHero and #OneLastMission began trending. People from across the globe expressed their admiration, recounting their own stories of loyalty, friendship, and the bond between humans and animals. Daniels didn't expect the overwhelming outpouring of support, but as he scrolled through messages from families, military veterans, and even K-9 handlers from other departments, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of pride and sorrow. Max had done more than any human could ask. He had shown the world the depth of his loyalty and selflessness. As the day wore on, the city's mayor arrived at the scene. She, too, had been moved by the story and immediately called for a public ceremony to honor Max. "We've lost a hero today," she told reporters, her voice shaking. "But we will never forget his courage, his heart, and the countless lives he saved." The public ceremony was set for the following week. In the meantime, the local news covered Max's story daily, sharing updates on the boy's recovery and offering tributes to the K-9 officer. Daniel stayed by Max's side, not wanting to leave him even for a moment. He knew time was running out, but for now, he allowed the world to see what he had always known. Max was more than a dog. He was a living legend, and he deserved to be celebrated as such. The day of Max's public ceremony arrived, and the entire city seemed to be mourning. The streets were lined with people, officers, families, community members, and even those who had never met Max but had been moved by his story. The mayor had called it a memorial, but it felt like a celebration of a life well lived. Max's life, a hero's life. The department's K-9 unit had never seen anything like it. Max was lying quietly in the back of a squad car, covered with a flag and surrounded by flowers. His handler, Officer Daniels, stood by his side, fighting back tears as the crowd waited for the ceremony to begin. Max was no longer able to stand on his own, but the love and admiration he had earned over the years were evident in every eye that looked toward him. As the ceremony started, Daniel stepped forward and placed his hand on Max's head. The crowd fell silent. Even the birds in the trees seemed to stop singing, as if honoring the dog who had given so much. Daniel's voice cracked as he spoke, but he didn't care. He owed Max this moment, this last goodbye. Max was more than a partner to me, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. He was family. He kept me safe. He kept our community safe. And he did it all with a heart bigger than any dog I've ever known. Max showed us all what loyalty means. He was a hero, and I'll never forget the sacrifices he made for us all. The crowd erupted into applause, and Daniels, unable to hold back any longer, let the tears fall. Max had always been the strong one, the brave one. But in this moment, it was Daniels who was left raw, vulnerable, realizing how much he would miss the dog who had been his partner through thick and thin. The ceremony continued with tributes from other officers, from the fire department, and from community leaders. Each one shared stories of how Max had made a difference, how his dedication, his bravery, and his simple presence had left an indelible mark on the city. When the ceremony was over, Max was driven to the veterinary clinic, where his final resting place had been prepared. Daniel stayed with him until the very end, stroking his fur and whispering, "You did it, buddy. You were everything. Thank you for everything." Max passed away quietly that night, leaving behind a legacy that would be remembered for generations. But his story didn't end there. Max's death created a void that could never truly be filled. Officer Daniels, along with the entire community, found themselves navigating through grief. But something remarkable started to unfold. Max's final act of courage had ignited a spark that began to change lives, far beyond what anyone had imagined. The Max Legacy Fund, set up in his honor, became a symbol of support for retired police K-9s across the region. Max's story had touched so many hearts, and the fund quickly grew. Officers, citizens, and animal lovers alike donated generously, understanding the importance of caring for these loyal animals who served with unmatched dedication. The fund aimed to provide medical care, retirement pensions, and adoptive homes for retired K-9s, ensuring they received the same level of care and love they had given during their service. Daniels, though still mourning, found solace in the way Max's legacy was taking shape. The community, too, rallied around the fund. Local businesses and schools hosted fundraisers, with children organizing dog walks and bake sales to contribute to the cause. The heartfelt connections that Max had formed with so many people, from his handler to strangers who only knew his story, were now driving positive change in the community. One morning, Daniels received a call that would leave him speechless. A local animal shelter, which had been struggling to keep its doors open, contacted him. They wanted to name a new K-9 puppy Max in honor of the legendary German Shepherd. Daniels could hardly believe it. This small, struggling shelter had decided that naming the pup after Max would not only honor him, but inspire others to adopt and give shelter animals a chance at the love and purpose Max had once known. Daniels agreed, and on a rainy afternoon, he stood at the shelter's ribbon-cutting ceremony for Max's home. The shelter had renovated a section to honor retired and rescued K-9s, with a plaque in the lobby reading, "In memory of Max, a true hero." As the shelter workers let out the new puppy, a beautiful Belgian Malinois, Daniels was struck by the parallels between the dog before him and the one he had lost. This new Max had yet to learn the world, but already he carried the legacy of the old. The ripple effect from Max's final act of service continued to unfold. A dog who had once been known only to his fellow officers was now a symbol of hope, change, and love. His spirit was alive in every donation, in every story shared, and in every new life given a second chance. As the months turned into a year, the memory of Max continued to resonate within the community. Officer Daniels had found peace in knowing that his partner's final act of heroism had sparked something larger than either of them could have imagined. The Max Legacy Fund had become a significant initiative, supporting retired K-9s and ensuring they had a chance to live out their golden years in comfort and care. The station, once quiet with grief, now had a renewed sense of purpose. Daniels found himself spending less time at the police station and more time with the remaining K-9s, but the bond he had shared with Max was irreplaceable. Still, he couldn't help but feel proud every time he walked into the station. The bronze statue of Max stood proudly at the entrance, a symbol of the dog who had given his all. Visitors, both local and from far away, often paused to take pictures, paying their respects to the legendary K9 who had become a symbol of sacrifice, loyalty, and bravery. One afternoon, as Daniel sat in his office, a letter arrived. It was from the family of the missing child Max had saved. The letter was simple but deeply moving. The child, now safe and healthy, had written a letter himself. In it, he thanked Max for saving him and for being brave when no one else could help. The family enclosed a framed photo of the boy, holding a small plaque that read, "In memory of Max, the hero who saved my life." Daniel stared at the letter for a long time, his hand resting on the frame. He thought of all the children, the families, and the countless people Max had impacted during his time on the force. Max hadn't just saved lives on the job. He had changed lives, given people hope, and left an imprint on the world. The letter became a reminder of what Max had represented, a legacy of selflessness, kindness, and courage. It wasn't just a plaque or a statue that would keep Max's memory alive. It was the ripple effect he had created, the community he had inspired. Through the Max Legacy Fund, through the stories shared by those who knew him, Max's legacy continued to grow, touching hearts far beyond the small city where he had served. Daniels knew that, though Max was gone, his influence would endure. His memory would always be alive in the hearts of those who had known him, and those whose lives had been touched by his heroism. The legacy of one extraordinary dog was immortalized, not just in statues or funds, but in the spirit of loyalty, courage, and love that he had embodied every day.